I never planned to disappear like in a movie. I simply arrived home earlier than usual and overheard the words that defined my childhood. I wish we only had one child. I stood frozen, gripping my grocery bag until it hurt, waiting for a punchline. Instead, I heard laughter. The scariest part was that it took them 3 months to notice I was gone. When they finally found me, it was not because they missed me. My name is Kenzie Webb, and for the last 11 months, I have been a ghost in my own childhood home. At 28 years old, this was not where I expected to be. I was supposed to be in a high-rise in Chicago or running a marketing firm in Seattle. But life has a way of humbling you with the brutal mathematics of student loans and a job market that collapsed right as I graduated. So, I was back in the guest bedroom, the walls painted a beige color that I detested, living under a silent, suffocating treaty with the two people who were supposed to love me the most. The arrangement was simple, transactional, and cold. I paid $600 a month in rent. I bought my own groceries. I did my own laundry. I kept my presence to a minimum. It was an unspoken agreement that if I was going to be a burden, I should at least be an invisible one. I was saving every penny I could, desperate to scrape together the $3,000 I needed for a deposit on an apartment, any apartment, just to get out of this house where the air always felt too thin to breathe. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of day where the sky looks like a bruised plum. I was working at Blue Kite Distribution, a warehouse job that paid the bills but eroded my soul one packing slip at a time. I was not supposed to be off until 7 in the evening. But Sarah, a single mother who worked the forklift in aisle 4, had looked frantic during our lunch break. Her babysitter had canceled. Without thinking, I offered to swap shifts with her so she could pick up her son. It was a small act of kindness, the kind that usually goes unpunished, but the universe has a cruel sense of humor. I clocked out at 3:30 in the afternoon. My muscles ached from lifting boxes, and my head throbbed with the dull rhythm of warehouse noise. But I felt a small spark of lightness. I had the afternoon off. The house would be empty. My parents, Robert and Ellen, usually worked until 5 or 6. I could go home, take a long shower without worrying about using too much hot water, and maybe just sit on the couch without feeling like I was taking up space that did not belong to me. On the way home, that spark of lightness turned into a foolish impulse of generosity. I stopped at the grocery store. I did not need anything for myself. My shelf in the pantry was stocked with ramen and generic oatmeal. But I thought about the tension that had been hanging over the dinner table lately. The way my father sighed when he looked at the grocery bill. The way my mother complained about the price of steak. I pushed the cart down the aisle, making choices that I could not really afford. I picked up 2 thick ribeye steaks, the kind with the perfect marbling that my father loved. I grabbed a bottle of the red wine my mother drank on special occasions. Costing $22, I bought fresh asparagus, expensive butter, and an artisan baguette. It was a peace offering. It was a bribe. It was me, standing in the checkout line, spending $85.40 that I should have been saving for my escape fund, all because I wanted to see them smile at me. I wanted to walk through the door and be the daughter who brought dinner, not the daughter who was a financial drain. I drove the rest of the way home with the windows down, letting the cool autumn air dry the sweat on my neck. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my father's sedan was already there. That was strange. He rarely left the office before 5:30. Then I saw my mother's car parked beside it. They were both home. The anxiety spiked in my chest, immediate and familiar. My fantasy of a quiet afternoon evaporated, replaced by the instinct to retreat. But I had the steaks. I had the wine. I could do this. I could walk in, surprise them, and maybe we could have one of those dinners like the families in commercials, where people actually liked each other. I parked my car on the street so I would not block the driveway, grabbed the heavy paper grocery bags, and walked up the driveway. The front door was for guests. I always used the side entrance that led through the garage and into the kitchen. It was part of the code: do not make a production of your arrival. The house was strangely quiet. Usually, the television in the den would be blaring news, or music would be playing. Today, there was only silence, heavy and thick. I navigated the garage. Stepping over the garden hose my father never coiled properly, and reached for the doorknob. I opened the door quietly. I did not do it on purpose to sneak up on them. It was just a habit born from months of trying not to exist. The door swung open without a creak. I stepped into the mudroom, which connected directly to the kitchen. That was when I heard them. They were in the kitchen, just around the corner from where I stood. I could hear the clink of a glass being set down on the granite counter. I could smell coffee and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. "I do not know. Rob," my mother said. Her voice was calm, conversational. "We can look at the flights for Christmas, but if Caleb brings Brielle, we are going to need the guest room." I froze. The guest room was my room. It was where I slept every night. "We can put Kenzie on the pull-out couch in the basement," my father replied. He did not sound malicious. He sounded practical, like he was discussing where to store a box of winter coats. "That thing is broken. Remember," my mother said. "Besides, you know how she gets. If we ask her to move downstairs, she will sulk for 3 days." "She is always sulking," my father said. I stood there, the grocery bags cutting into my fingers. The paper handles were twisting, digging into my skin, but I could not let go. I felt a flush of heat climb up my neck. I wanted to announce myself. I wanted to walk in and say, "I am here. I can hear you," but my feet seemed nailed to the floor. Then came the silence, a pause that lasted perhaps 3 seconds. "Sometimes," my father said, his voice dropping slightly, not in a whisper, but in a tone of honest confession. "Sometimes I wish we only had Caleb." The world stopped. It did not spin. It did not blur. It just stopped. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited. I waited for the punchline. I waited for him to say, "I am kidding." Obviously. I waited for my mother to gasp, to scold him, to say, "Robert, that is a terrible thing to say. We love both our children." "I know," my mother said. 2 words, 2 syllables that destroyed 28 years of history. She did not hesitate. She did not argue. She just agreed. "It sounds awful to say," she continued, her voice light, as if she were gossiping about a neighbor. "But everything is just so easy with Caleb. He has his life together. He is happy. With Kenzie, it is just heavy. She is exhausting. She is always so sensitive. You have to watch everything you say around her or she gets that look on her face." "The victim look," my father said. "Exactly," my mother said. "It is draining. Rob, I just want to enjoy our retirement. I want peace. And when she is here, the house just feels crowded." "We did our duty," my father said. "We raised her. We paid for that useless degree. At some point, you just want to look at your family and feel pride, not pity." Then, they laughed. It was not a villainous cackle. It was not the dramatic laughter of movie antagonists. It was worse. It was a warm, comfortable, shared chuckle between a husband and wife who felt safe in their honesty. It was the sound of 2 people bonding over a shared burden. And I was the burden. I stood in the mudroom, clutching the $85 worth of food that I had bought to make them love me. My hands were burning red from the weight of the bags. My chest felt like it was caving in. A physical pressure so intense I thought my ribs might snap. My brain tried to reject it. They do not mean it. They are just venting. Everyone says things they do not mean when they are tired, but they did not sound tired. They sounded relieved. They sounded like they were finally speaking a truth they had been holding back for years. "I wish we only had Caleb. Caleb, my younger brother, 26 years old, successful, charming, the one who lived 2 hours away and only visited when he needed his laundry done. Yet was treated like a returning war hero every time he walked through the door. Caleb, who they bragged about to their friends. Caleb, who they did not wish out of existence." I looked down at the grocery bags. The neck of the expensive wine bottle poked out. The butcher paper wrapped around the steaks was starting to crinkle. I realized I was crying only because I felt a cold drop land on my hand. I was not sobbing. I was not making a sound. It was a silent, physiological reaction to shock. I needed to leave. If I walked into that kitchen now, everything would explode. They would deny it. They would say I misunderstood. They would call me sensitive, proving my mother's point. They would gaslight me until I believed that I was the crazy one for being hurt that my parents wished I had never been born. Or worse, they would not deny it. They would look at me with that pity my father talked about and ask me to move to the basement so Caleb could have my bed. I could not give them that satisfaction. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, I turned my body around. I had to be careful. If the bags rustled too loud, they would hear. If I bumped the washer, they would know. I stepped back out the door, moving with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. I closed the door. The latch clicked softly. Inside, I could hear my father ask, "Did you hear something?" "Probably just the wind," my mother replied. "Or maybe the neighbors." I walked back down the driveway. My legs felt numb, like I was wading through deep water. I reached my car and opened the back door. I placed the grocery bags on the seat, the steaks, the wine, the butter. I stared at them for a second. $85. That was nearly 15% of my next paycheck. I got into the driver's seat and closed the door. The sound of the car door shutting felt final, like a period at the end of a sentence. I did not start the car immediately. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I looked at the house. It was a nice house, a 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn and a wreath on the door that my mother changed with every season. It looked like a home. It looked like a place where a family lived, but it was a lie. It was a stage set. And I had just found out that I had been written out of the script seasons ago. I checked my phone. It was 4:12 in the afternoon. I could go back in. I could confront them. I could scream. I could demand an apology. But what good is an apology for existing? You cannot apologize for wishing your child was not there. You cannot take back the desire to erase someone. If I went back in there, I would just be Kenzie the exhausted, Kenzie the sensitive, Kenzie the burden. I put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over with a low rumble. I did not send a text. I did not write a note on the kitchen counter. I did not leave the groceries on the porch. I put the car in reverse. I backed out of the driveway, past the mailbox where my name was not listed, past the garden my mother loved more than me. I drove down the street, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror until it disappeared around the corner. I felt a strange sensation settling over me. It was not relief. Exactly. It was clarity. Cold. Sharp. Absolute clarity. For 28 years, I had been trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, why I never felt like I fit, why their love always felt like it came with conditions I could never quite meet. Now I knew. It was not about what I did. It was about who I was. I was the extra child, the spare, the mistake they tolerated but never celebrated. I turned onto the main road, merging with the traffic. I did not know where I was going yet. I just knew I could not stop. They had already drafted a life that didn't include me, and I decided to put my signature on the version where I chose myself. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a decision like that. It isn't peaceful. It's the hush of a room after someone slams a door, everyone waiting for the next sound, only to realize the argument is over because I've stopped playing my part. I didn't post a cryptic update online. I didn't write a theatrical final message and leave it by the coffee maker like a prop. I didn't scatter hints for someone to collect. People who leave dramatic breadcrumbs usually want to be intercepted, want someone to read between the lines, panic, and rush in to pull them back into the same old script. They want the confrontation. I didn't. I just wanted distance. Quiet. A clean exit from the noise. So I went to a bank branch in the next few towns over. Somewhere unfamiliar. Just in case my father checked the statements right away. I withdrew exactly what the daily limit allowed, $500. Then I stopped at another bank where I kept a small savings account and withdrew what I could from there. $240. That was my net worth. $740. That was the price of my freedom. I abandoned my car in a long-term parking lot near a strip mall. It was a lease in my father's name anyway. He would get a notification eventually when the payment stopped or the city towed it. Leaving it felt like shedding a heavy skin. I walked 2 miles to the bus station, the kind of place that smells of diesel fumes and floor cleaner that never quite masks the scent of desperation. I bought a ticket to Riverstone, Missouri. It was not a random choice, but it was close to one. Riverstone was 3.5 hours away, far enough that I would not run into a neighbor at the grocery store, but close enough that the bus ticket did not bankrupt me. More importantly, Riverstone was where Maya Ellis lived. Maya was the only person from high school I still spoke to, mostly because she was the only one who didn't look at my life with polite condescension. We had reconnected a year ago online. She did not ask about my career trajectory or why I was still living at home. She just sent me dark humor about the absurdity of existence. I texted her from the bus. I need a place to crash. I will pay. I will clean. I just need a floor. She replied 3 minutes later. Key is under the mat. Don't mind the cat. He bites. The bus ride was a blur of gray highways and rain-streaked windows. I sat in the back. My hood pulled up, clutching my backpack. Every time the bus slowed down, my heart hammered against my ribs, expecting a police cruiser to block the road. I expected my phone to ring. I expected a frantic text from my mother asking where I was with the groceries, but the phone stayed black. I arrived in Riverstone at 9 o'clock at night. The air was colder here, sharper. I walked to Maya's apartment complex, a brick building that looked tired but sturdy. Maya was not home. She worked the night shift for a private security firm, sitting in a booth guarding a pharmaceutical plant from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Her apartment was small, a 1-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor. It smelled of incense and cat litter. I did not sleep that first night. I sat on her beige carpet, my back against the radiator, and stared at the door. I held my phone in my hand, the screen dimming and brightening as I tapped it. Waiting. Surely, by now, they had noticed. It had been 7 hours. Dinner time had come and gone. The steaks I bought were probably sitting in the back seat of my car. Spoiling. 7 hours. Nothing. The next morning, Maya came home, her uniform rumpled, her eyes circled with dark shadows. She looked at me. Really looked at me, with a gaze that stripped away the defenses I tried to keep up. You look like hell, Webb, she said, tossing her keys on the table. I feel like hell, I admitted. You staying? If that is okay, just for a bit. Couch is yours. Rent is buy your own food, and do not let the cat out. She paused, looking at my phone which was still clenched in my hand. You running from the law? No. Boyfriend? Parents? Maya nodded, as if that explained everything. She did not ask for details. She just went into her bedroom and closed the door to sleep the day away. That became our rhythm. I was alone in a strange city, in a strange apartment, living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The first thing I did was cut the digital cord. I went to a discount electronics store and bought a prepaid phone with a new number. I created a new email address. I walked into a local credit union and opened a basic checking account with $50. Using my passport for ID. Then, I went to work. I could not apply for jobs that required a background check or called references. I could not use my degree. I needed cash, and I needed it immediately. I signed up with 3 different temp agencies that specialized in day labor. My first job was at a distribution center, not unlike the one I had left. But here I was not a coordinator. I was a loader. I spent 8 hours a day lifting 40-pound boxes of frozen poultry onto pallets. The cold seeped into my bones. My fingers grew stiff and clumsy. The second week, I cleaned out a foreclosure property. I spent 10 hours scrubbing mold off bathroom tiles and hauling trash bags filled with someone else's broken life. I came home every evening smelling of sweat and industrial cleaner. My body ached in places I did not know existed. My hands, once soft from office work, grew rough and blistered. I welcomed the pain. The physical exhaustion was a narcotic. When my back screamed in agony, I could not think about the kitchen. When my hands shook from fatigue, I could not check my phone, but I did check it. I had kept my old smartphone. I kept it powered down, buried at the bottom of my backpack, wrapped in socks like it was something I didn't deserve to touch, every night. Around 11, after Maya left for her shift, I'd take it out. It became a ritual of self-torment. I'd switch it on, watching the logo flare softly in the dark room. I'd wait for the flood. I'd brace for the angry voicemails, the frantic texts, the threats to call the police. Day 3, 0 missed calls. Day 7, 0 missed calls. The phone still had plenty to say. Of course, spam emails, a dentist reminder for an appointment 6 months out, a newsletter from some clothing brand. But from the people who brought me into the world, nothing. Not until the second week did a message finally appear in the family group chat. My heart lurched into my throat. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly let the device slip from my grip. This was it. They were worried. They were asking. I opened the chat. It was a photo from my mother, a meme. A picture of a golden retriever wearing sunglasses with the caption, "Ready for the weekend." That was it. No Kenzie, where are you? No please come home, just a dog and sunglasses. She had sent it to everyone. Me, Caleb, Dad. It was a broadcast. It was normal. I stared at the screen until the light burned my retinas. She did not know I was gone. Or worse, she knew, and it did not disrupt her routine enough to stop her from sharing a funny picture. A few days later, Caleb posted in the chat a photo of a bottle of amber liquid. Finally got my hands on the Pappy Van Winkle. Who wants a pour? My father replied 2 minutes later with a thumbs-up emoji. I sat on Maya's floor, surrounded by the silence of the empty apartment, and realized the truth. I had not disappeared. I had just ceased to be convenient. I was a piece of furniture that had been moved to storage. They did not notice the absence of the chair. They just enjoyed the extra space in the room. I was not missing. I was just gone. The days turned into weeks. I worked. I ate cheap noodles. I slept. Maya and I existed in shifts. We would cross paths at 6 in the morning and 9 at night. We shared coffee in silence. She saw the hollowness in my eyes, but she respected the wall I had built. One Tuesday, exactly 1 month after I left, I was putting away my meager groceries in Maya's kitchen. I had earned enough to buy a few luxuries, a box of crackers, a bag of apples, and a jar of peanut butter. I pulled the jar out of the bag. It was a specific brand, the one with the red lid and the blue label, the one my mother always bought because she said it made the best cookies. I held the jar in my hand. The plastic was cool. Suddenly, I was back in that kitchen. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear the casual cruelty of their laughter. I wish we only had Caleb. The jar slipped from my fingers. It hit the linoleum with a heavy thud. It did not break, but the sound was like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. I fell with it. My legs just gave out. I slid down the front of the cabinets until I hit the floor. I grabbed the jar, clutching it to my chest like it was a lifeline. I tried to breathe, but my throat was closed. It was a physical blockage, a knot of grief and humiliation so large it choked me. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Just a ragged, gasping wheeze. I was 28 years old. I was sitting on the floor of a stranger's kitchen in Missouri, and I was an orphan, not because they were dead, but because they had never really been parents. I cried then, not the polite, silent tears from the driveway. This was ugly. This was primal. I shook. I heaved. I made sounds that frightened the cat, sending him scurrying under the sofa. I cried for the little girl who tried so hard to be good. I cried for the teenager who got straight A's hoping for a well done that never came. I cried for the woman who bought $85 worth of steak to buy affection. I cried because they were eating dinner right now. They were probably watching TV. They were sleeping soundly. They were happy. My absence had not created a hole in their lives. It had fixed a leak. The front door unlocked. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear anything over the sound of my own unraveling. Maya walked in. She was early. She must have forgotten something. She stopped in the doorway. She saw me curled up on the linoleum, clutching a jar of peanut butter, sobbing like I was dying. She did not rush over to hug me. She did not coo or offer empty platitudes. She kicked off her boots, walked over to the fridge, and took out a bottle of water. She sat down on the floor opposite me. She leaned back against the oven door and just watched. She let me cry. She gave me the dignity of witnessing my pain without trying to fix it. When the sobs finally turned into hiccups, she cracked the seal on the water bottle and handed it to me. I took it, my hands shaking so bad I spilled some on my shirt. I drank. The cold water shocked my system. "You checked the phone again," Maya said. It was not a question. I nodded, wiping my face with my sleeve. "They sent memes. They are drinking whiskey." Maya took a sip of her own water. Her face was impassive, illuminated by the harsh overhead light. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp, flinty. "You are waiting for them to wake up," she said. "You think if you stay gone long enough, they will suddenly realize you were the glue holding it all together. You want the movie moment where the police knock on their door and they collapse in grief." "I want them to care," I whispered. "Is that so much to ask?" "It is if they are incapable of it," Maya said brutally. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "Listen to me. Kenzie, you are looking for water in a stone. You can squeeze it until your hands bleed, but it is never going to rain." I looked at the peanut butter jar in my lap. The cheerful logo mocked me. "So what do?" I asked. "Do I just disappear forever? Do I let them win?" Maya reached out and took the jar from me. She set it on the counter, out of reach. "You are not disappearing," she said. "You are escaping. There is a difference." She stood up and offered me a hand. Her grip was strong, calloused. "But here's the rule," she said, pulling me up until I was standing on my own 2 feet. She looked me dead in the eye, her expression serious, almost angry. "Don't go back just to beg them to see you. If you go back because you are standing so tall they have no choice but to look up. You don't go back for an apology. You go back for a reckoning." She released my hand. "Now, wash your face. You look like a raccoon." I picked up an extra shift at the warehouse for tomorrow. "It pays $15 an hour. You want it." I took a breath. It was shaky, but it went all the way into my lungs. "Yes," I said. "I want it." "Good," Maya said. "Set your alarm for 5. She walked into her bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen. I looked at the phone sitting on the counter. I looked at the peanut butter. I picked up the phone. I did not turn it on. I walked to the drawer where Maya kept the junk scissors. Tape, batteries. I opened the drawer and dropped the phone inside. I pushed it to the back, behind a box of staples. Then I closed the drawer. I did not need to check it anymore. I knew the answer. They wished they only had one child. I was going to grant that wish. Time has a way of calcifying silence. At first, the lack of contact feels like a gaping wound, fresh and bleeding, demanding attention. But as the days bleed into weeks, and weeks stack into months, the wound scabs over. It becomes a scar. It becomes a fact. 3 weeks passed. Then 6 weeks. Then 2 months. I kept waiting for the police to knock on Maya's door. I kept waiting for a private investigator to show up at the warehouse where I was now pulling double shifts, loading pallets of dog food and garden supplies until my shoulders felt like they were packed with broken glass. I kept waiting for my bank to freeze my new account, flagging it for suspicious activity because surely my parents had reported me as a missing person. But the world kept turning. The sun rose and set over Riverstone, Missouri. My back muscles grew harder. My hands developed calluses that snagged on silk, and my phone remained a black brick in the back of the junk drawer. I had stopped checking it daily. Now, I only checked my email from a library computer once a week, on my day off. It was a masochistic ritual, like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurt. Exactly 3 months after I walked out of my parents' kitchen, the notification appeared. It was not a frantic plea. It was not a subject line in all caps screaming, "Where are you?" or "Call us immediately." The subject line read, "Thanksgiving Logistics Menu Planning." It was a group email. My mother loved group emails. They were her way of managing her family like a small, slightly unruly corporation. The recipients included my father, Caleb, my Aunt Linda, 2 cousins, and me. I sat in the public library, the smell of old paper and carpet cleaner filling my nose, and I clicked open the message. "Hi everyone, I know it seems early, but I want to get the bird ordered from the butcher by Friday. Dad and I are thinking of doing a traditional roast this year, plus the honey ham for Caleb, since we know how much he loves it. Brielle is bringing her famous corn casserole yum. Please let me know if you are bringing a +1 so we can get the head count right for the table settings. We are going to use the good china this year. Love. Mom." I scanned the text 3 times. I looked for my name. I looked for a sentence asking if I was still alive. I looked for a clause acknowledging that one of the recipients of this email had not been seen or heard from in 90 days. There was nothing. Just ham for Caleb and corn casserole from Brielle. Then, I saw it, at the very bottom, separated from the main body of the text by a double line break, was a postscript. P.S. Kenzie, if you are around and free, let us know so we can set a plate. If I am around, as if I were a neighbor who traveled frequently for business, as if I were a distant cousin who might or might not make the drive, as if I had not lived in that house for 28 years, as if I had not left my car, my clothes, and my entire life behind without a word. If you are around, it was a masterclass in minimization, with that one sentence. My mother had absolved herself of any guilt. She had reached out. She had included me. If I did not show up, it was my choice. She could tell her friends. We invited her. But you know how Kenzie is. She is so independent. I stared at the screen until the librarian announced that the computer lab was closing in 10 minutes. I had 2 choices. I could reply. I could unleash 3 months of rage into a keyboard. I could scream that I was not around, that I was 300 miles away living on a futon and eating ramen because they wished I did not exist. I could force them to acknowledge the reality of what they had done, or I could do what they were doing. I could accept the reality they had written. I did not hit reply. I did not hit delete. I simply signed out of the account. I walked out into the cold November air, zipped up my thrift store jacket, and caught the bus back to Maya's apartment. They were not panicked. They were not grieving. They were just organizing the seating chart. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a gray, drizzling sky. In my previous life, this day began at 6 in the morning. I would be in the kitchen, peeling 10 pounds of potatoes while my mother critiqued the size of the peels. I would be scrubbing the baseboards because guests notice everything. I would be running to the store for the one ingredient she forgot, maneuvering through holiday traffic while Caleb slept in until noon. By the time dinner was served, I would be too exhausted to eat. Sitting at the end of the table, listening to my father praise Caleb's choice of tie while criticizing my posture. This year, I woke up at 10. Maya kicked my mattress. "Get up, Webb," she said. "We are going to the Rusty Spoon." The Rusty Spoon was a 24-hour diner near the highway that smelled permanently of bacon grease and stale coffee. It was not the sort of place where you wore good china. We met up with 2 other people there. There was Frantic Tony, a guy I worked with at the warehouse who always wore a beanie, and Sarah, a nurse who worked alongside Maya's security detail at the hospital. We squeezed into a booth with vinyl seats taped together with duct tape. We ordered the Thanksgiving special, which consisted of turkey slices that looked suspiciously like processed deli meat, stuffing that came from a box, and cranberry sauce that retained the shape of the can, and it was the best meal of my life. "So," Tony said, waving a French fry like a baton. "My mom called me this morning to tell me I am going to hell because I did not come home for Mass," I told her. "Ma, if hell has better wages than this warehouse, sign me up." We laughed. It was a loud, raucous sound that made the waitress glare at us. "My dad sent me a gift card for a steakhouse," Sarah said, rolling her eyes. In a city 4 hours away from where I live. He thinks I still live in Dallas. I moved 3 years ago. At least you got a gift card, Maya said. My parents sent me a Bible. Again. They looked at me. It was my turn to contribute to the misery poker of dysfunctional families. My parents sent an email, I said, cutting into my rubbery turkey. They said if I was around, I could stop by. They are eating ham with my brother and his fiancée. To the ham, Tony shouted, raising his coffee mug. To being around, Maya added, clinking her glass against his. I raised my mug. To being invisible. We drank. We ate. We told stories about our worst jobs, our worst dates, our worst haircuts. For the first time in 28 years, I was at a holiday table where no one was waiting for me to fail. No one was analyzing my tone. No one was wishing I was someone else. I looked around the booth. Tony had mustard on his chin. Sarah looked exhausted. Maya was wearing a hoodie with a bleach stain. We were a collection of strays, people who did not fit into the Hallmark card version of America. And I felt light. I felt weightless. I laughed at a joke Tony made, and the sound surprised me. It was not the polite, stifled giggle I used at home. It was a belly laugh, deep and real. I am okay. I thought, I am actually okay. Later that night, back at the apartment, Maya went to work. I was alone again. The high of the diner lunch had faded, leaving behind a quiet melancholy. My phone buzzed. I had turned it on earlier to check the time and forgotten to turn it off. I looked at the screen. A text message. From Caleb. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was it. The brotherly concern. The secret admission that he missed me. I opened the message. You good? 2 words, 7 letters, no question mark regarding my location, no happy Thanksgiving, no mom is driving me crazy. Wish you were here to buffer. Just you good. It was a check-the-box text. It was the absolute minimum amount of effort required to maintain the illusion of being a brother. If I replied, yes, he could go back to his whiskey and his fiancée with a clear conscience. If I replied no, he would have to deal with drama. And Caleb hated drama. He was betting on me saying nothing, or saying fine. I looked at the blinking cursor. I thought about the ham. I thought about the laughter in the kitchen 3 months ago. I wish we only had Caleb. I did not reply. I deleted the thread. If he wanted to know if I was good, he could have asked 3 months ago. He could have driven to the house when he realized my car was gone. He could have called. He did not want to know. He just wanted to feel like he had asked. December arrived with a vengeance. The temperature in the warehouse dropped to freezing. I bought thermal underwear and gloves with the fingertips cut off. I was promoted to shift lead, which came with a $2 an hour raise. It was not much, but it meant I could start saving for my own place. Christmas was the final hurdle, the big one, the holiday that my mother planned with military precision starting in August, 2 weeks before Christmas. The email arrived. Subject: Christmas Day. Schedule potluck spreadsheet. Hi team, here is the plan for the big day. Please click the link to the Google Sheet and sign up for a side dish. As usual, I will handle the main course and desserts. Link Web Family. Christmas, 2025. I should not have clicked it. I knew that. Maya would have slapped my hand if she were there. But morbid curiosity is a powerful drug. I clicked the link. The spreadsheet opened on the library computer screen. It was color-coded. Green for confirmed, yellow for pending. Row 2, Mom, roast beef, Yorkshire pudding. Row 3, Dad, wines bar, setup. Row 4, Caleb, ice music playlist. Row 5, Brielle, green bean almondine. Row 6, Aunt Linda, mashed potatoes. Row 7, Cousin Mark, rolls. I scrolled down. I looked for row 8. It was empty. I looked for a column with my name. In previous years, there was always a column titled Kenzie's Assignments. It was usually the longest list: napkin folding, silver polishing, appetizer trays, cleanup duty. There was no column. There was no row. There was no Kenzie TBD. My name was nowhere on the document. I was not even an option. I was not a variable to be accounted for. I had been formatted out of the spreadsheet. I sat back in the plastic chair. The library was decorated with paper snowflakes and tinsel. A child was crying in the children's section. This was different from the Thanksgiving email. That had been a passive dismissal. This was active erasure. To create this spreadsheet, my mother had to sit down at her computer. She had to type in the names. She had to create the rows. She had to consciously decide not to type Kenzie. It was not that they had forgotten me. You forget keys. You forget to buy milk. You do not forget a human being you raised for nearly 3 decades. They were getting used to the quiet. They were enjoying the lack of friction. They were looking at their life without me, and they were deciding that they preferred the streamlined version, the version where they only had the successful son and his charming fiancée, the version where they did not have to pretend to care about the daughter who tried too hard. I closed the browser. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snowy street. A bus was pulling up to the curb. For 3 months, a small, pathetic part of me had been building a fantasy. In this fantasy, my absence was a punishment. I was teaching them a lesson. I thought that by withdrawing my labor, my money, and my presence, they would realize my value. I thought they were suffering without me. But they were not suffering. They were eating roast beef and color-coding spreadsheets. My disappearance had not broken them. It had relieved them. A cold, hard stone settled in my stomach, but strangely, it did not feel like grief anymore. It felt like foundation. Maya was right. I could not go back to beg. I could not go back to be inserted into row 8 as an afterthought. If they wanted a life without me, I would give it to them. I would give them the most thorough, complete absence they could imagine, but I would not vanish into nothingness. I would not be the sad story of the girl who ran away and failed. I was going to build a life, a real life, a life so full, so vibrant, so undeniable, that when our paths finally crossed again, and I knew they would, I would not be the daughter seeking approval. I would be a stranger they could not afford to ignore. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I did not turn it on. I walked to the trash can near the exit. I looked at the black screen one last time. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. I dropped the phone into the bin. It landed with a dull thud on top of a discarded coffee cup. I pushed open the heavy library doors and stepped out into the winter wind. It was freezing, but the air tasted clean. I had work to do. By mid-January, the numbness had worn off, replaced by a gritty, determined focus. I had been living on Maya's floor for nearly 4 months. I had worked through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, and through the New Year. The holiday pay at the warehouse had been generous, and because I spent money on absolutely nothing other than basic food and my share of Maya's utilities. My bank account had started to look like that of a functioning adult. I had saved $2,400. It was enough. It was time to stop being a guest and start being a tenant. I found a studio apartment on the south side of Riverstone. It was not glamorous. The building was a converted motel from the 70s, the kind of place where the carpet in the hallway always smelled faintly of damp wool and onions. But the unit had its own front door, a kitchenette with a working stove, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot rather than a brick wall. The rent was $650 a month. I toured it on a Tuesday morning before my shift. The landlord, a gruff man named Mr. Henderson, who wore his pants too high on his waist, seemed indifferent to my existence, which was exactly what I was looking for. "First month, last month, and a security deposit," he grunted, handing me a clipboard with a rental application. I run a credit check on everyone, no exceptions. Got burned by a guy last year who turned Unit 4 into a meth lab. "My credit is fine," I said confidently, and I believed it. I had always been meticulous, even living at home, drowning in student loan payments. I had never missed a due date. I balanced my checkbook. I tracked my FICO score like a hawk. It had been 740 when I left home in October, a solid, respectable number. I filled out the application, handed over the $40 application fee in cash, and went to work feeling a lightness in my chest I had not felt in years. I was building a fortress. This apartment would be the first brick. 2 days later, Mr. Henderson called me while I was on my lunch break. "Ms. Webb," he said, his voice sounding even more gravelly than before. "I can't give you the unit." I froze, a plastic fork halfway to my mouth. "What? Why, I have the cash for the deposit ready." "It's not the cash," he said. "It's the report. I don't rent to people with active delinquencies. Policy." "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice rising. "I don't have delinquencies. My student loans are on a deferment plan, and my credit cards are paid off." "It's not a loan," he said. "It's a collections flag, $900, sent to collections 3 weeks ago. Sorry, try the complex down on 4th Street. They take anyone." The line went dead. I sat in the break room, the noise of the warehouse washing over me like a tide. Forklifts beeped, people laughed, someone was microwaving fish, but I was in a cold, silent bubble. A collections flag. I did not panic. That was the old Kenzie. The old Kenzie would have cried and assumed she had done something wrong. The new Kenzie, the one who stacked 50-pound boxes for 10 hours a day, got angry. I finished my shift. I walked to the public library. I logged onto the computer and navigated to a credit monitoring site. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I pulled up the report. There it was. A red mark, a jagged scar on my financial history. Creditor North Tech Fiber Solutions. Status 90+ days past due. Sent to collections. Amount $892. I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to connect the dots. North Tech Fiber Solutions. That was the cable and internet provider for my parents' house. Then, the memory hit me. 2 years ago, my father had gotten into a screaming match with a customer service representative because the promotional rate on their bundle had expired, and the bill had jumped up by $40. He had canceled the service in a rage. 2 days later, when he realized he could not watch his golf tournaments, he had made me call back to reinstate it. "Put it in your name. Kenzie," he had said, handing me the phone. "New customers get the locked-in rate for 2 years. It saves us $50 a month. I will just give you the cash for the bill." I had done it. I signed the contract. My name was on the account. My social security number was the guarantor. For 2 years, the bill had been on autopay from the joint household account, the one they used for groceries and utilities. I had forgotten about it. It was just one of the invisible threads that bound me to that house. I looked at the payment history on the screen. October paid, November missed, December missed, January missed. The timing was precise. I left in late October. The moment I walked out that door, they stopped paying the bill. But they had not stopped using the internet. I remembered the Thanksgiving email, the meme of the dog in sunglasses, the Christmas spreadsheet. They were online. They were streaming movies. They were checking stocks. They were emailing relatives. They were using a service that was in my name, consuming it daily, and simply refusing to pay for it. Why? It was not because they were broke. My father made 6 figures. My mother had a pension. It was because the bill came in an email to me, or perhaps a paper statement addressed to Mackenzie Webb, and since I was not there to open it, or remind them, or handle the administrative burden of their lives, they just ignored it. It was laziness. It was a profound, narcissistic apathy. They probably saw the envelopes piling up on the counter and tossed them in the trash because it was not their name on the window. Let Kenzie handle it, except Kenzie was gone. So they let Kenzie burn. They were destroying my financial future while watching Netflix on my credit. I felt a heat rise in my face that had nothing to do with the library's heating system. This was not emotional neglect. This was tangible damage. A collections record could stop me from renting an apartment, buying a car, or even getting certain jobs. I took out my phone. I dialed the number for North Tech Fiber Solutions. I spent 45 minutes on hold. I listened to smooth jazz and recorded messages telling me how important my call was. When a representative finally answered a woman named Brenda, who sounded exhausted, I did not yell. "I need to pay a past due balance," I said, "and then I need to close the account immediately." "I see the account here," Brenda said. typing in the background. It is currently with a third-party agency. To restore service, you would need to pay the full balance plus a reconnection fee. I do not want to restore service, I said, my voice cutting through the line like a razor. I want to pay the debt, so it shows as settled, and then I want to terminate the contract. If you terminate now, there is an early cancellation fee of $150 because the 2-year contract doesn't expire until March, Brenda warned. Add it to the total, I said. That will bring the total to $1,042. $1,042. That was half my savings. Half of the freedom money I had broken my back to earn. I closed my eyes. I could see my father sitting in his recliner, the blue light of the television flickering on his face. I could see him complaining about entitled millennials, while he let his daughter's credit score implode because he could not be bothered to update a billing address. Take the payment, I said. I read her my debit card number. I felt physically sick as I said the digits. I visualized the money draining from my account. Payment successful, Brenda said. The account is now closed. The equipment, the modem and router, needs to be returned within 10 days, or there will be an unreturned equipment fee of $200. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. The equipment is at the service address, I said. I do not live there. I cannot retrieve it. Well, Brenda said, the account holder is responsible. Mark it as lost, I said. Charge me the $200 now. I want this done. I want my name off everything. Today. Ma'am, that is a lot of money. Do it. $1,242. Gone. It is done, Brenda said, sounding slightly terrified of me. The service has been disconnected. The signal should cut out in about 2 minutes. Thank you, I said. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, imagining the scene. It was 7 p.m. My parents were likely in the living room, maybe watching the news. Maybe Caleb was over, showing them a YouTube video. And suddenly, the screen would go black. The buffering wheel would spin. The Wi-Fi icon on their phones would vanish. They would be annoyed. My father would grunt and hit the router. My mother would say, "What happened to the internet?" They would have no idea that 300 miles away, I had just paid over $1,000 to sever the connection, but the satisfaction was fleeting. The anger remained, hot and heavy. I walked back to Maya's apartment in a daze. When I walked in, Maya was in the kitchen, making toast. She took one look at my face and put down the butter knife. "What happened?" she asked. "Did they call?" "No," I said. "I just spent $1,200 paying their cable bill." I told her everything, the collections agency, the rental rejection, the realization that my name was still being used as a utility mule. I paced the small kitchen. I should sue them. I should send them the bill. I should call them right now and scream until my throat bleeds. I want them to know. I want them to know I had to use my escape fund to clean up their mess. I reached for my phone. I wanted to unlock the blocked numbers. I wanted to unleash the fury. "Don't," Maya said. She did not shout. She just said it with that flat, absolute certainty of hers. "Why not?" I demanded. "They stole from me. Maya. They cost me an apartment." "If you call them," Maya said, "you are telling them that they can still hurt you. You are telling them that even from 300 miles away, they have your buttons. You call them, and you are just the hysterical daughter again. They will say, 'Oh, we forgot. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? We would have paid you back.' And they will turn you into the villain." She was right. I knew she was right. So what? I just eat the loss. "You don't eat it," Maya said. "You document it." She went to her backpack and pulled out a fresh yellow legal pad and a pen. She slammed them onto the kitchen table. "Sit down." I sat. "Write it down," she commanded. "Date, time, amount, reason. Save the confirmation number Brenda gave you. Print the bank statement showing the transaction." "Why?" "Because this is not a family squabble anymore," Maya said. Her eyes dark. "This is a dossier. You are building a case, not for a judge, maybe, but for yourself. You need to see it in black and white. They are not just neglectful. Kenzie, they are dangerous. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, but I forced it to steady. January 14th, North Tech Fiber. Paid $1,242 to prevent credit damage. Account closed. I looked at the words. It looked like a police report. Check everything else, Maya said. Car insurance, cell phone plan, streaming services, library cards, any joint accounts. The car is in Dad's name, I said. But the insurance, I think I am a named driver on their policy. Call them, Maya said. Remove yourself. If they get into an accident and you are on the policy, somehow it will be your fault. Cut the ties. Every single one. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone. I called the insurance company. I called the dentist's office to remove them as emergency contacts. I called the bank where I had a childhood savings account that my mother was a co-signer on and closed it. Transferring the meager $12 to my new account, I scrubbed my existence from their administrative life. By midnight, I was exhausted. But the rage had cooled into something solid, like concrete setting. I looked at the yellow legal pad. It was a list of liabilities, a list of ways they had kept hooks in me without me even realizing it. I lost the apartment, I said quietly. You will find another one, Maya said. And when you do, it will be yours. Completely yours. No co-signers. No ghosts. They are going to be so mad when they realize the internet is gone, I said. Maya smirked. Good. Let them sit in the dark. I looked at the list again. $1,200. It was a fortune to me, but it was the price of a lesson. I had always thought that if I just disappeared physically, I would be free. I was wrong. The trap wasn't just the house. The trap was the assumption that I existed to make their lives easier. They took my presence for granted. Then they took my absence for granted. And when I was gone, they took my credit score for granted. I have a new rule, I told Maya. Yeah. I don't speak to them, I said. Not until the check clears. Not until I have the apartment. Not until I'm standing on ground so solid that nothing they say can knock me over. That sounds like a good rule, Maya said. I tore the sheet off the legal pad. I folded it and put it in a plastic folder I had bought for my resume. I labeled the folder Evidence. I was not playing a game of hide-and-seek anymore. I was conducting a controlled demolition of my former self. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights reflecting on the snow. I thought about my parents' house, dark and silent, the modem blinking a frantic red error light. I didn't vanish from their home. I realized that tonight, I just removed my name from the trap they called a family. It was late February, the kind of Tuesday that feels like it's made of gray sludge and exhaust fumes. I was sitting in the break room at the warehouse, nursing a cup of vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. My phone was in my hand. I had developed a new habit, one Maya warned me against, but I couldn't break checking the social media profiles of my extended family from a burner account I'd created. I told myself it was reconnaissance. I told myself I was just keeping tabs on the enemy, but deep down, I knew it was something more pathetic. I was looking for proof that I mattered. I scrolled past photos of my cousin's baby, past a rant from my uncle about gas prices. And then, there it was, a post from Aunt Linda. So blessed to celebrate this beautiful couple today. Welcome to the family. Brielle Engagement Party Family, First Love. The photo attached to the post was a wide shot. Taken in my parents' living room, the room looked immaculate. There were flowers on the mantelpiece, white lilies, my mother's favorite. There were balloons in silver and gold, and there were the people. My parents were in the center, beaming. My father had his arm around Caleb, who looked handsome and flushed with happiness. Next to Caleb was a woman I assumed was Brielle Hart. She was stunning blonde, petite, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my entire savings. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on Caleb's chest. Around them was everyone, Aunt Linda, Uncle Mike, my cousins from Ohio who only flew in for weddings and funerals, even the neighbors, the Millers, were there in the background, holding champagne flutes. It was a perfect family portrait, except for the ghost. I zoomed in. I scanned the edges of the frame, looking for a gap, a space where someone might have been standing but stepped away. I looked for a solemn face, someone who looked like they were missing a daughter, a niece, a sister. There was no gap. The composition was tight, complete. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was whole. The caption beneath the photo read, "The whole gang together." Such a perfect day. The whole gang. I wasn't just missing from the photo. I was missing from the definition of the family. I felt a physical blow to my chest, harder than any box I'd lifted that day. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a dull, crushing weight. I couldn't breathe. The air in the break room felt suddenly thin, insufficient. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. Tony looked up from his sandwich, startled. "You okay?" "Webb." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I walked out of the break room, down the long concrete corridor, and pushed open the heavy metal exit door. It was raining outside, a cold, miserable drizzle that turned the snow into slush. I didn't have my coat. It was back in my locker. I was wearing just my work uniform, a thin gray polo shirt and canvas pants. I didn't stop. I walked out into the parking lot. The rain hit my skin like icy needles. I walked past the rows of cars, past the dumpster, out onto the access road. I just walked. My teeth started to chatter. But I welcomed the cold. It was real. It was something I could feel. Unlike the phantom limb sensation of my erased life, I walked until my hands were numb, until my hair was plastered to my skull, until my shoes were soaked through. I walked until the image of that photo was burned into my retinas, superimposed over the gray sky. They had thrown a party, a celebration of family, and they hadn't even told me. They hadn't invited me to be ignored. They had simply proceeded as if I had never been born. I was not the black sheep. I was the null set. I walked for an hour. When I finally turned back, my body was shivering violently, but my mind was strangely, terrifyingly clear. I arrived back at Maya's apartment soaked to the bone. Maya wasn't home. She was on an early shift. The apartment was warm, smelling of the cinnamon tea she liked. I didn't go to the bathroom to dry off. I didn't change my clothes. I sat down at the small kitchen table, water dripping from my hair onto the wood. I pulled a notebook from my bag. It was a cheap spiral-bound thing I used to track my hours. I ripped out a clean page. I picked up a pen. My hand was shaking from the cold, making my handwriting jagged and ugly. "Dear Kenzie," I wrote, "stop waiting for them to love you." I wrote down every memory that had haunted me for years. The time my father forgot to pick me up from band practice, and I waited in the rain for 3 hours. The time my mother redecorated my room into a guest room the week I left for college. The time Caleb broke the window and blamed me, and they believed him without asking. The joke in the kitchen, the internet bill, the engagement party. I filled 3 pages. I poured every ounce of hurt, every slight, every moment of neglect onto the paper. It was a purging, an exorcism. When I was done, my hand cramped. The paper was warped from the water, dripping from my hair. I stood up and walked to the kitchen sink. I took a lighter from the drawer, the one Maya used for her candles. I held the corner of the first page over the sink and flicked the lighter. The flame caught the paper. It curled, turning black, the blue ink vanishing into ash. I watched the fire eat my pain. I watched the words I just wanted them to see me disappear into smoke. I burned the second page, then the third. The smoke detector chirped once, a warning, but I didn't care. I watched the last flake of ash swirl down the drain. I turned on the faucet and washed it all away. I was done. I was done being the victim. I was done being the sad girl in the rain. I was done being the daughter who waited by the phone. That version of Kenzie, the Kenzie who begged for scraps of affection, was dead. She died in that sink, turned to ash. I went to the bathroom then. I stripped off my wet clothes. I took a hot shower, scrubbing my skin until it was pink and raw. I washed the rain and the warehouse grime and the self-pity off my body. I dressed in dry clothes, clean sweatpants, and a soft hoodie. I went back to the kitchen table. I opened a fresh page in the notebook. I wrote a single sentence at the top: if they want me to disappear, I will disappear so thoroughly that when I come back, they won't recognize me. But this wasn't about hiding anymore. This was about metamorphosis. I drew a line down the center of the page. On the left, I wrote current assets. On the right, I wrote goals. I had $2,400. I had a job that paid $15 an hour. I had a shared apartment. It wasn't enough. If I wanted to win, and I realized now that this was a war, not for their love, but for my own existence, I needed more. I needed leverage. I needed power. I needed to be someone they couldn't edit out of the photo because I would be the one holding the camera. I started listing ideas. I needed a second job. I needed a skill. I needed a business. I remembered my grandfather. He was the only person in my family who had ever looked at me with genuine pride. He was a carpenter. He spent hours in his shed, turning rough blocks of wood into smooth, beautiful bowls and chairs. He had taught me how to sand, how to stain, how to feel the grain. Wood has a memory. Kenzie, he used to say. It remembers the storm and the sun. You just have to help it tell its story. I had loved that smell, sawdust and varnish. It was the smell of creation. I looked around Maya's apartment. In the corner, there was a beat-up wooden chair she had found on the curb. One leg was wobbly. The finish was scratched and peeling. I walked over to it. I ran my hand over the rough wood. I could fix this. I didn't have a workshop. I didn't have fancy tools. But I had hands. I had patience. And I had a burning, white-hot need to prove that I was not garbage. I went back to the notebook. Under goals, I wrote second bloom. It was just a name, a thought, but it stuck. A second bloom, a chance to grow again after being cut down. The next day, I went to the library not to check social media, but to research. I watched videos on furniture restoration. I looked up the cost of sandpaper, wood glue, and stain. I found a local flea market that rented stalls for $20 a weekend. I started working overtime at the warehouse. But with a new energy, I wasn't just lifting boxes, I was funding my empire. Every dollar was a brick in my new foundation. I stopped looking at the past. I stopped looking at the engagement photo. Let them have their party. Let them have their perfect, Kenzie-free life. They thought they had buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. 2 weeks later, I was walking home from the hardware store, carrying a bag of supplies. When my phone buzzed, it was a notification from a job alert I had set up months ago and forgotten about. New request, custom woodworking gift for wedding. I stopped on the sidewalk. I opened the email. It was from a local wedding planner in Riverstone, looking for artisans to create bespoke gifts for high-end clients. I wasn't ready. I had restored exactly one chair and a small side table. But my heart hammered against my ribs with a strange, precognitive rhythm. I looked at the sky. It was clear and blue. I was going to apply. I was going to get this. And I was going to make something so beautiful that it would force the world to look at me. And someday, that world would include them. Not because I invited them, but because I would be too big to miss. The burst of energy I felt after burning that letter did not last. Motivation is a volatile fuel. It burns hot and fast. But when it runs out, it leaves you stranded in the cold. After the adrenaline of my self-exorcism faded, I did not immediately rise like a phoenix. I crashed. For 5 days. I did not go to the warehouse. I called in sick with a vague excuse about food poisoning, a lie that slipped easily from my tongue because I felt toxic from the inside out. I stopped shaving my legs. I stopped brushing my hair. I lay on the air mattress in my corner of Maya's living room, wrapped in a gray blanket that smelled of stale sleep, and I watched videos on my phone. I watched people renovating vans to live the van life. I watched women in beige cardigans organizing their pantries with clear plastic bins. I watched motivational speakers shout about grinding and hustling. I consumed hours of content about how to fix a life while actively letting my own rot. It was a paralysis born of terror. I had declared war on my past. But I had no weapons for the future. The sheer magnitude of what I had to do, build a life from scratch. Alone, with no safety net, crushed me. It was easier to lie in the dark and pretend I was hibernating. Maya tolerated it for 3 days. On the 4th day, she started making noise. On the 5th day, she snapped. She came home from her shift at 7 in the morning, smelling of rain and exhaustion. She found me exactly where she had left me 10 hours prior, curled in a ball. Bathed in the blue light of a YouTube video about morning routines. She walked over and ripped the blanket off me. The cold air hit my skin like a slap. "Hey," I protested, reaching for the cover. "I am watching this." "You are watching someone else live," Maya said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "And you smell like a locker room. I am depressed." "Maya, leave me alone." "You are not just depressed," she said, tossing her keys onto the table. "You are disappearing. You left your parents' house because they treated you like a ghost. Now look at you. You are haunting my living room." She pointed at the darkened window. "You are doing their job for them. Kenzie, they wanted you gone. Congratulations. You are gone. You are not even a person right now. You are a lump of regrets in dirty sweatpants." Her words cut deep because they were true. I wasn't fighting back. I was fading out. I was letting the silence of my family consume me. Maya went into her room and slammed the door. I lay there for a long time, the silence of the apartment ringing in my ears. I slowly sat up. My muscles were stiff. My head throbbed from dehydration. I walked to the bathroom and turned on the light. The fluorescent bulb flickered and hummed, casting a harsh, unforgiving glare on the mirror. I looked at the woman in the glass. Her hair was a matted knot of brown, greasy at the roots. Her skin was pale and sallow, with dark purple bruises under her eyes. Her lips were chapped. She looked like a stranger. She looked like someone who had given up. That was the moment the fear finally outweighed the lethargy. I realized that if I did not move, right now, I would never move again. I would stay in this gray stasis until I completely evaporated. I reached into the shower and turned the handle. I didn't wait for the water to warm up. I stepped in while it was still freezing, gasping as the icy needles hit my back. The shock forced air into my lungs. It forced me to be present. I grabbed the bar of soap and started to scrub. I scrubbed hard. I washed my hair 3 times, digging my fingers into my scalp until it tingled. I shaved. I exfoliated. I washed away 5 days of stagnation. When I stepped out, the mirror was steamed over. I wiped it with my hand. The face looking back was still tired, still pale, but the eyes were clear. The ghost was gone. I put on clean clothes. Jeans, a white t-shirt, real clothes, not pajamas. I walked out into the living room. I opened the blinds. The morning sun was weak, filtering through the clouds, but it was light. I stripped the sheets off the air mattress and threw them in the wash. I picked up every piece of trash on the floor: candy wrappers, empty water bottles, tissues, and shoved them into a garbage bag. Then, I went to the kitchen. I did not make instant ramen. I took out a carton of eggs. I took out the butter. I chopped a scallion that was starting to wilt in the crisper drawer. I cooked. It was a simple act: heating a pan, whisking eggs, watching them fluff up into soft yellow curds. But it was an act of creation. It was an act of care. I sat at the table and ate the eggs on a real plate. They tasted rich and savory. They tasted like life. I was back. After breakfast, I retrieved my notebook. I turned past the pages of angry scribbles and the burned edges where I had destroyed my letter. I found the page where I had written second bloom. I looked at the list of ideas I had jotted down. Retail job, dog, walking, data entry. I crossed them all out. My eyes drifted to the bottom of the page. To the word I had circled 3 times. Woodworking. It was insane. I had no workshop. I had no capital. I had no portfolio. I was living in a friend's apartment with an air mattress and a dream based on memories of a grandfather who had died 10 years ago. But when I thought about the smell of sawdust, the feeling of sandpaper smoothing out a rough edge, I felt a spark in my chest. It was the only thing on the list that didn't make me feel tired. Furniture restoration wasn't just about fixing objects. It was about taking something broken, discarded, and unloved, and revealing that it still had value. It was a metaphor I desperately needed to believe in. I checked my bank account. I had $2,000 left after the internet bill debacle and my living expenses. I could not afford to rent a studio space. I looked at the sliding glass door that led to Maya's balcony. It was a tiny concrete slab, maybe 4 feet by 8 feet, overlooking the parking lot. It wasn't a workshop, but it was a space. I put on my shoes and walked to the pawn shop on 4th Street. It was a dingy place filled with musical instruments and power tools that had been traded for quick cash. I found a palm sander. It was covered in white dust, and the cord was wrapped with electrical tape, but when I plugged it in, it buzzed with a ferocious, angry energy. $20, the guy behind the counter said. 15, I countered. Sold. I went to the hardware store next. I bought a variety pack of sandpaper, a can of dark walnut stain, a small can of polyurethane, and 2 brushes. I bought a drop cloth to protect Maya's balcony floor. Total investment $48.12. I didn't have a project yet. I walked home, scanning the curbs. It was trash day in the neighborhood behind our apartment complex. I found it on the corner of Elm Street, a small, 3-shelf bookcase. It was painted a hideous, peeling lime green. One of the shelves was crooked. Someone had used it as a coaster, leaving ring marks on the top. It was garbage. I picked it up. It was solid wood, not particle board. Pine, maybe. I carried it home, the awkward weight digging into my arms. I hauled it up the stairs to the 2nd floor. I set it up on the balcony. I laid down the drop cloth. I plugged in the sander. I put on a pair of safety glasses I had borrowed from the warehouse. I pressed the sander against the lime green paint. The noise was loud, a harsh grinding sound that probably annoyed the neighbors, but to me, it sounded like progress. The paint flew off in a cloud of green dust. Beneath it, the wood was pale and clean. I spent 6 hours on that balcony. My arms shook from the vibration of the sander. My clothes were covered in dust. I sweated through my t-shirt. I sanded away the green. I sanded away the water rings. I fixed the crooked shelf with a hammer and a few nails I found in Maya's junk drawer. When the wood was bare and smooth as skin, I wiped it down. Then I opened the can of walnut stain. This was the magic part. I dipped the rag into the dark liquid and wiped it across the pale pine. The grain popped instantly, turning a deep, rich brown. The wood drank it in. It transformed from a piece of trash into something elegant, something with history. I let it dry overnight. The next morning, I applied the polyurethane. When it was finished, I stepped back. It wasn't a masterpiece. It was a simple pine bookshelf, but it looked warm. It looked sturdy. It looked like it belonged in a home, not on a curb. I waited for the afternoon sun to hit the white wall of the living room. I staged the shelf against the wall. I put a stack of Maya's books on it and a small potted plant. I took a photo with my phone. I adjusted the brightness. I cropped out the edge of the air mattress. I created a listing on an online marketplace app. Solid wood bookshelf. Restored, dark walnut finish. Perfect for small spaces. $45. I hit post. I stared at the screen. Who would pay $45 for something I found in the trash? I was a fraud. I was kidding myself. I put the phone down and went to help Maya with the dishes. "You made a mess on the balcony," she said, but she was smiling. She had seen the shelf. "It looks good. Web, really good." "It's just a shelf," I muttered. "It is a start," she said. 20 minutes later, my phone pinged. I froze. I wiped my soapy hands on a towel and picked it up. "Is this still available? Can I pick it up today?" It was a woman named Sarah. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes," I typed. "Still available." "Great. I will come by in an hour." I spent the next hour pacing. I checked the shelf for dust. I worried the stain wasn't dry enough. I worried she would see the old paint underneath. The doorbell rang at 5 o'clock. I walked down to the entrance of the building carrying the shelf. A woman in a Subaru was waiting. She looked normal. She looked like a person who had a home and a life and needed a place to put her books. "It looks even better than the photo," she said, opening her trunk. "I love the color." "Thank you," I said. My voice was tight. She reached into her purse and pulled out two $20 bills and a 5. She handed them to me. I took the money. The paper felt crisp in my hand. "Here, let me help you," she said, taking the shelf. "Thanks again." She drove away. I stood on the sidewalk, holding the $45. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't enough to pay rent. It barely covered the cost of the materials I had bought. But it was money, real money. Someone had looked at something I made with my own 2 hands and decided it had value. They didn't pay me because I was their daughter. They didn't pay me because they pitied me. They paid me because I had created something worthy. I looked at the bills again. This was different from the warehouse wages. That was money paid for my time, for my body's labor. This was money paid for my vision, for my skill. I walked back up the stairs. Taking them 2 at a time, I burst into the apartment. "I sold it," I told Maya. $45. "Hell yes," she said, raising her coffee mug. I sat down at the table and smoothed the bills out. I put them in a separate envelope. I wrote business capital on the front. I wasn't just Kenzie Webb, the girl who disappeared. I was a maker. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. I needed a name. I needed a banner to march under. I thought about the shelf. It had been discarded, left to rot in the rain. I had stripped it down, sanded off the ugly layers, and given it a new face. I had let it bloom again, just like me. I picked up the pen and wrote in block letters at the top of the page. Second Bloom Workshop, specializing in restoration, refinishing, and custom wood pieces. I stared at the name. It felt right. It felt strong. It acknowledged the damage but focused on the regrowth. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was preparing. I spent the rest of the night scouring the online listings for more free furniture. I found a coffee table with a broken leg and a set of dining chairs with torn upholstery. I messaged them all. "I can pick up tonight." My balcony was about to get very crowded. I went to sleep that night on the air mattress. But I didn't feel like a ghost. I could still smell the wood stain on my fingertips. It was the scent of the future. My parents had wished for a life without me. They were getting it, but they had no idea what kind of life I was building in the vacuum they left behind. I was going to bloom so bright and so big that they would need sunglasses to look at me. And this time, I wouldn't be the one seeking their attention. They would be the ones wondering where the light was coming from. Spring had arrived in Missouri, bringing with it a humidity that made the air feel heavy and thick. But my business was moving faster than the weather. Second Bloom Workshop had graduated from Maya's balcony to a small, rented storage unit with electricity. It wasn't a proper studio. I had to keep the garage door open to vent the fumes. And the lighting was a single fluorescent strip that buzzed like an angry hornet. But it was mine. I had been operating for nearly 5 months. My portfolio was growing: a restored mid-century dresser, a set of farmhouse chairs, a custom oak coffee table. I wasn't getting rich, but the money was steady enough that I had finally moved into a studio apartment of my own, just 3 blocks from Maya. I checked the business email every morning at 7. Usually, it was spam or inquiries about pricing that never went anywhere, but on a Tuesday in early May, a subject line caught my eye. Inquiry custom wedding box with engraving. Rush order. I opened it, expecting a standard request from a stressed bride. "Hi there. I found your page through the Riverstone Local Artisans Group. Your work is stunning. I'm looking for a very specific gift for my fiancé for our wedding day. I know it's short notice, but I was hoping for a custom-made wooden whiskey box, something vintage-inspired but elegant. I want to have a message engraved on the inside lid. We are getting married in June, so I know the timeline is tight. Please let me know if you have availability. Best. Brielle Hart." I stopped breathing. The name sat on the screen, innocuous and terrifying. Brielle Hart, my brother's fiancée, the woman from the engagement photo, the woman who was bringing corn casserole to a Thanksgiving dinner where I was not invited. I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over the mouse. It had to be a coincidence. Riverstone was 3 hours away from my parents' home. Why would she be emailing a tiny restoration business in Missouri? Then I remembered the Riverstone Local Artisans Group. Maya had insisted I join it on social media to boost my SEO. It had thousands of members. Brielle must have joined it looking for vendors, casting a wide net for authentic and rustic elements for her wedding. She didn't know who I was. That was the realization that hit me hardest. If my parents or Caleb had ever really spoken about me, she would know the name Kenzie Webb. She would see the name on my website or my email signature and make the connection. But to her, I was just a vendor. I was Second Bloom Workshop. I was a service provider. My family had erased me so thoroughly that my future sister-in-law was trying to hire me to make a gift for my brother. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. It was a dark, twisted cosmic joke. I stood up and walked to the door of the storage unit. I looked out at the rows of metal doors. I could delete the email. I could say I was booked. I could ghost her, just like my family had ghosted me. It would be the safe choice. It would keep my life separate, clean, and unpolluted by their drama. But Maya's voice echoed in my head. You don't go back to beg. You go back for a reckoning. This wasn't begging. This was business. If I took the job, I would be entering their orbit again. But on my terms, I wouldn't be Kenzie the disappointment. I would be the professional artisan they needed. I would hold the power of the transaction. I sat back down. I cracked my knuckles. I hit reply. Hi, Brielle. Thank you for reaching out. I have availability for a June delivery. A custom whiskey box sounds like a beautiful project. Do you have a specific type of wood in mind? Walnut or cherry usually pairs well with that vintage aesthetic. Best, Kenzie owner. Second Bloom Workshop. I signed it Kenzie. Just Kenzie. It was a common enough name. It was a test. If she recognized it, she would ask. She replied 20 minutes later, Oh, wonderful walnut sounds perfect. He loves dark wood. And Kenzie. That's a cute name. No preference on the finish. Just make it look timeless. She didn't know. She had absolutely no idea. I secured the deposit $200 via an online invoice. When the notification popped up on my phone, payment received from Brielle Hart. I felt a strange thrill. It wasn't vindictive. It was validation. My brother's household was now funding my independence. I threw myself into the project. I sourced a beautiful piece of black walnut, the grain tight and straight. I spent days planing it, cutting the dovetail joints by hand. This box had to be flawless. It wasn't just a product. It was a statement. It was a physical manifestation of everything they said I wasn't capable. Skilled, valuable. While the glue dried in the clamps, I realized I needed to armor myself. If this was going to happen, if I was going to inevitably collide with my past, I needed to be bulletproof. I spent the next week getting my legal house in order. I filed the paperwork to register Second Bloom Workshop as an LLC. I opened a dedicated business bank account. Separating my finances completely from my personal identity, I built a professional website, paying a photographer friend of Maya's to take high-resolution shots of my work. I wasn't just a girl in a storage unit anymore. I was a company. I also started writing. My website had a blog section. Most artisans used it for tutorials or updates. I used it to tell a story. I wrote a post titled, The Wood Remembers. I started this business in a time of silence. I typed. I had left a home where I felt invisible, where my voice was drowned out by the noise of expectations I could never meet. I walked away with nothing but a bag of clothes and a heavy heart. The first piece I restored was a shelf I found in the trash. It was covered in ugly paint, battered and broken. It reminded me of myself. I stripped it down. I sanded away the damage. I found the beautiful grain hidden underneath. That is why I do this. Because I know what it feels like to be discarded. And I know that with enough care and enough time, even the most overlooked things can bloom again. I didn't use names. I didn't mention my parents, or Caleb, or the specific town. But the details were there. The timeline matched. The emotional texture was undeniable to anyone who actually knew me. I hit publish. I shared the link on my business Facebook page. Maya shared it. A few local friends shared it. It got maybe 50 likes. I didn't think much of it. It was just content. The work on the box continued. It was coming together beautifully. The walnut was rich and dark, polished to a satin sheen. I installed heavy brass hinges that opened with a satisfying resistance. Then came the engraving. Brielle had sent the text in a separate email. Engraving text. To my Caleb, you are the only one who matters. Love, B. I stared at the stencil I had printed out. You are the only one who matters. It was a romantic sentiment. Sure, but in the context of my family. It felt like a diagnosis. It was the family motto, etched in brass, and now, soon to be burned into wood. Caleb was the sun. Everyone else was just gravity. I set the laser engraver. I watched the beam burn the letters into the velvet lining of the lid. The smell of scorched wood filled the tiny shop. It smelled like finality. I was applying the final coat of wax 3 days later when my phone rang. It wasn't a client. It wasn't Maya. The caller ID said Mom. I froze. The polishing rag dropped from my hand. I hadn't spoken to her in 7 months. Not since the day in the kitchen. Not since I walked out. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Had Brielle figured it out? Had Caleb seen the invoice? Was this the angry confrontation I had been dreading? I took a deep breath. I picked up the phone. I didn't say hello. I just pressed answer and held it to my ear. Kenzie. Her voice was the same, that terrifyingly familiar pitch, hovering somewhere between concern and annoyance. Hi, Mom, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. I saw the post, she said. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask where I was living. She didn't apologize for the 3 months of silence before they noticed I was gone. What post? I asked, though I knew. The blog thing, she said. Aunt Linda shared it on her timeline. She loves those support local business stories. She didn't know it was you until she saw the picture of you in the About section. Okay, I said. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. Con, did you really write that? She asked. Her voice sounded strange, not angry, baffled. About being discarded, about being invisible. Yes, I said. I wrote it. It sounds so dramatic, she said, letting out a nervous little laugh. People are going to think we beat you or something. You know we always provided for you. I wrote my truth, I said. It wasn't about you providing food or shelter. It was about how I felt. Well, she huffed. It is very well written. I will give you that. She cleared her throat. But Kenzie, do you really do this woodworking since when you were always so clumsy with tools? Remember when you tried to assemble that IKEA desk and cried, I learned, I said. I practiced. And people pay you, she asked. Real money. Yes, people pay me. I see. She sounded skeptical. She sounded like she was waiting for the punchline. For me to admit that this was just a hobby funded by a credit card I couldn't pay off. I have a business license, Mom. I have clients. I have a shop. A shop? Her tone shifted up a notch. Like a store. Like a workshop. Where I build things. Oh. Silence again. Well, she said finally, Dad and I were surprised. We thought you were, I don't know, working retail somewhere. We didn't know you had this in you. We didn't know you had this in you. Translation. We didn't think you were capable of anything remarkable. I am busy, Mom, I said. I have a deadline. Was there something else? Right, she said, sounding flustered by my dismissal. Well, with the wedding coming up, and Caleb, we were wondering if you were planning to reach out. He misses you. You know. Does he? I asked. He has my number. He texted me once in 7 months. He is a boy. Kenzie. You know how he is. He is not good with phones. He is 26. Mom, he runs a sales team. He lives on his phone. You are so hard on him, she sighed. Always so hard on everyone, just like in that blog post. I felt the old anger flare up, hot and biting, but I tamped it down. I looked at the whiskey box on my workbench, the beautiful, flawless walnut box that her precious Caleb was going to receive. I am not hard, I said. I am just clear. I have to go. Mom, I have a client order to finish. What kind of order? She asked. Grasping for a connection, I looked at the engraving. To my Caleb. Just a gift, I said. A custom box. For a wedding. Oh, that is nice, she said vaguely. Well, don't be a stranger. Kenzie, we are here. I know where you are, I said. I hung up. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear, from adrenaline. She hadn't called to apologize. She hadn't called to bring me home. She had called because she was embarrassed that Aunt Linda might think they were bad parents. She had called to fact-check my success because she couldn't believe her clumsy daughter had actually built something. She still didn't see me. She only saw the reflection of herself in my actions. But she knew. She knew I was out there. She knew I wasn't just surviving. I was building. I turned back to the box. I picked up the polishing cloth. I buffed the wood until it shone like glass. Brielle Hart was going to get the best work of my life. And when Caleb opened this box on his wedding day, when he ran his fingers over the smooth walnut and smelled the beeswax finish, he would be holding a piece of my soul. He wouldn't know it yet, but he would. I packed the box carefully in layers of tissue paper and bubble wrap. I placed my business card inside a heavy, cream-colored card with gold foil lettering, Second Bloom Workshop, Kenzie Webb, Proprietor. I didn't hide the name. I put it right on top. I sealed the shipping box. I printed the label. Destination Brielle Hart. Care of the Webb residents. They were hosting the wedding prep at the house. Of course they were. I taped the box shut. Delivery for Caleb, I whispered to the empty room. I was sending a Trojan horse into the fortress of my childhood. And this time, I wasn't the one who was going to get hurt. The phone call with my mother did not end with a warm reconciliation. It ended with a transaction. She had called to verify my existence not because she missed me, but because the rumor mill of our extended family had started to churn, and she needed to control the narrative. 2 days later, she called again. This time, her voice was brighter, pitched an octave higher. The way she sounded when she was hosting a dinner party and something was burning in the oven, but she was determined to smile through the smoke. Kenzie, she said, your father and I have been talking, since you are doing so well with this wood thing, and since you are obviously back on your feet. We think you should come to the wedding. It is in 3 weeks. We can squeeze you in at table 9 with the cousins. Table 9, the table by the kitchen doors, the table for the people you had to invite but didn't really want to talk to. I am very busy, Mom, I said, leaning back in my office chair. The leather creaked. It was a sound of authority I had grown to like. June is my busiest month. But it is your brother, she pressed. And people will ask. Aunt Linda is already asking why you haven't RSVP'd. It looks odd. There it was. It wasn't about family unity. It was about optics. An absent sister raised questions. A present but silent sister at table 9 was a manageable variable. I tell you what, I said, keeping my voice smooth and cool, like polished oak. I have a commission to deliver for the wedding anyway. A client hired me to make a custom gift for Caleb. A client? Mom asked. Who? I cannot disclose that. Client confidentiality. I lied. It wasn't really a lie. Brielle hadn't told me to tell them. But the piece is delicate. It is black walnut, hand-joined. I do not trust a courier with it. I need to deliver it personally to ensure it arrives safely. Oh, Mom said. I could hear the gears turning in her head. She was trying to figure out if this was a trap. So you will drive up, you will come to the house. I will drop it off, I said. On the morning of the rehearsal dinner, I will set it up. Make sure it is perfect, and then I will head out. I do not want to intrude on your seating charts. Well, she said, sounding relieved. That would actually be very helpful. You can say hello to everyone, show your face, and then if you have to get back to work, well, everyone understands that small business owners are busy. She was writing the script for me. Kenzie stopped by, but she is just so swamped with her little shop she couldn't stay. It was perfect. Exactly, I said. I will see you then. I hung up. I looked at the whiskey box sitting on my workbench. It was finished. The brass hinges gleamed under the shop lights. The engraving inside the lid. To my Caleb. You are the only one who matters was sharp and deep. But the box was not just a container for whiskey. It was a container for the truth. I had designed a false bottom. It was a classic woodworking trick, something my grandfather had taught me when I was 10. Every good cabinet has a secret. He used to say, I had raised the interior floor of the box by 1/4 of an inch. To the naked eye, it looked like the solid bottom of the box, lined with crushed velvet. But if you knew where to press a tiny, imperceptible knot in the wood grain on the back panel, the velvet floor popped up. Inside that shallow cavity, I placed a letter. I had written it 10 times. I had burned the angry drafts. I had shredded the emotional ones. The final version was cold, factual, and devastating. It was addressed to Brielle. Dear Brielle, you do not know me, but you have hired me. My name is Kenzie Webb. I am Caleb's sister. I did not hide my identity to trick you. I hid it because in my family, my identity is inconvenient. I want you to know that the box you are holding was made with care. I do not blame you for anything. You are entering this family with your eyes on the joy, and I hope you find it. But you need to know the history of the house you are marrying into. 8 months ago, I disappeared. I did not run away. I walked out because I heard my parents wish I did not exist. For 3 months. They did not call. They did not search. They did not file a report. They simply adjusted their lives to fit the silence. I am telling you this not to ruin your day, but because you are about to pledge your life to these people. You deserve to know that their love is conditional. It is a spotlight, and if you step out of it, they will leave you in the dark. This box is my gift to my brother. The craftsmanship is my gift to myself. The truth is my gift to you. Sincerely, Kenzie Webb. Owner, Second Bloom Workshop. I folded the letter into a small envelope made of heavy cardstock. I sealed it with wax, a deep, blood-red seal stamped with my company logo. I placed it in the false bottom. I pressed the velvet floor back down until it clicked into place. It was invisible. Unless Brielle dropped the box, or Caleb got curious about the weight, it might stay hidden for years, or she might find it next week. That was the beauty of it. It was a time bomb with no timer. It was a truth that would wait until it was ready to be found. But I wasn't content to rely solely on a hidden letter. I needed a public declaration. I needed to control the atmosphere of the room before I even walked into it. I called Sarah, the customer who had bought my first restored shelf. It turned out Sarah wasn't just a nurse. She had a sister who ran a popular lifestyle blog in Missouri called The Heartland Maker. They did features on local artisans, focusing on stories of grit and reinvention. I have a story for your sister, I told Sarah, 2 days later. A reporter named Emily called me. We met at my studio. I didn't give her the names of my parents. I didn't name the town I grew up in. I kept it professional, but I didn't shy away from the emotional narrative. I left a toxic environment, I told Emily, my hands resting on the smooth surface of the walnut box. I was in a place where I felt like I was fading away. Woodworking brought me back. It taught me that you can take something that has been chipped and ignored and turn it into the centerpiece of the room. Emily loved it. She took photos. She took a close-up of my hands sanding a piece of oak. And, crucially, she took a stunning, high-definition photo of the finished whiskey box. The article went live on Thursday morning. The rehearsal dinner was on Friday. The headline read, From the Shadows to the Spotlight, How Second Bloom Workshop's Kenzie Webb Carved a New Life. The article was shared on Facebook. It was shared on Instagram. It started to circulate in the local artisan groups, the same groups Brielle followed. I sat in my apartment on Thursday night, watching the view count tick up. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Linda. Is this you? Attached was a screenshot of the article. Yes, I replied. Your mom is going to have a heart attack. Aunt Linda wrote back. But the box looks beautiful. Is that for Caleb? See you tomorrow? Aunt Linda. I typed. I didn't need to say more. The seed was planted. By tomorrow morning, everyone in that family would have read the article. They would have read the part where I said, I realized I had to leave to survive. They would have seen the photo of the gift. They would know I was coming. And they would know that I was bringing the evidence of my success right into their living room. My mother couldn't claim I was too busy or just a little hobbyist now. The article called me a rising star in the regional design scene. It validated me in a language she understood public acclaim. I went to my closet to pack. I had thought about buying a new dress, something red, something flashy. The classic revenge dress that screams, "Look at what you lost." But that felt like a costume. That felt like I was still playing a role for them, trying to win a reaction. I pushed the dresses aside. I pulled out a pair of tailored navy trousers, high-waisted, sharp pleats. I pulled out a white silk blouse, simple, expensive, structural. I chose my leather boots, the ones I wore when I was meeting high-end clients. I wasn't going to a wedding as a guest. I wasn't going as a sister. I was going as the CEO of Second Bloom Workshop. I was going as a vendor making a delivery. I packed my bag. I packed the box. I slept soundly that night, for the first time in months. I didn't dream about the kitchen. I didn't dream about the silence. I dreamed about the sound of a saw cutting through hardwood clean, precise and loud. Friday morning was crisp. I loaded the box into the back of my used station wagon, a sensible vehicle I had bought with my own money. The drive took 3 hours. As I crossed the state line, I felt the old anxiety try to claw its way up my throat. The landscape was familiar. The exit signs were the same ones I had stared at from the back seat of my parents' car for 18 years. But I wasn't in the back seat anymore. I was driving. I pulled off the highway. I drove through the suburbs. I passed my old high school. I passed the grocery store where I had bought the steaks and the wine 8 months ago. I turned onto their street. The house looked exactly the same. The lawn was manicured. The wreath on the door had been changed to a spring floral arrangement. There were cars in the driveway, Caleb's truck, my parents' sedans, and a few others I didn't recognize. I parked on the street. I didn't pull into the driveway. I wasn't family. I was traffic. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. Minimal, sharp eyeliner, no lipstick. I got out of the car. I walked around to the trunk and lifted the box. It was heavy, solid. It felt like a shield. I walked up the driveway. My boots clicked on the pavement. The front door was open. People were moving inside. I could hear laughter. I could hear my mother's voice directing someone to move a vase. I didn't knock. I stepped into the foyer. The air smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. It smelled like the lie they had been living. "Delivery," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a knife. The room went silent. My mother was standing by the staircase, holding a clipboard. She froze. Her eyes went to my face, then to the box, then back to my face. She looked older, or maybe I just looked different. "Kenzie," she whispered. Caleb stepped out of the living room. He was wearing a polo shirt and holding a beer. He looked at me, and his jaw actually dropped. "Holy shit," he said. "Language," my mother hissed automatically. But she didn't look away from me. I didn't smile. I didn't rush forward to hug them. I stood in the center of the foyer, holding the box with ease. "I have a package for Brielle Hart," I said. "From Second Bloom Workshop." Brielle appeared from the kitchen. She looked radiant, flushed with excitement. She saw me, and her eyes widened. "Oh, you're here," she exclaimed. She rushed forward, oblivious to the tension that was strangling the rest of the room. "You must be the maker, Kenzie, right?" "Hello, Brielle," I said. "It is so nice to meet you. I love the article. I had no idea you were." She trailed off. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, she looked at Caleb. She looked at my mother. "You know each other?" she asked, confusion clouding her face. My mother opened her mouth. I could see the panic in her eyes. She was about to spin a story. She was about to say, "Oh, this is our prodigal daughter." Isn't it a wonderful surprise I beat her to it? We have met, I said calmly. I used to live here. Brielle looked at me, then at the box. You used to live here? A long time ago, I said, before I started my own life. I walked past my mother. I didn't look at her. I walked past Caleb, who stepped back as if I were radioactive. I set the box down on the entry table. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud. Inspect it, please, I said to Brielle. I want to make sure you are happy with the finish before I sign off on the delivery. I unlatched the brass hooks. I lifted the lid. The smell of walnut and beeswax drifted into the room. The engraving caught the light. To my Caleb, you are the only one who matters. Caleb made a choking sound. He had seen the inscription. Brielle gasped. It is perfect. Kenzie, it is absolutely perfect. I'm glad you like it, I said. I looked at Caleb. I held his gaze. I wanted to make sure the sentiment was accurate. My father walked in from the den. He saw me. He stopped dead. Kenzie, he grunted. Hello, Robert, I said. Not Dad. Robert. The power shift in the room was palpable. They were terrified. They were waiting for me to scream, to cry, to make a scene that would ruin the rehearsal dinner. They were waiting for the sensitive Kenzie to explode, but I just stood there, adjusting the velvet lining, checking the hinges. I was the professional. They were the customers. There is a care card inside, I told Brielle. Keep it out of direct sunlight. Use a soft cloth to dust it. I looked at her, and for a second, my mask slipped just enough to show genuine pity. And there is a special compartment, I said softly, so only she could hear. But maybe save that for later, after the wedding. She nodded, entranced by the box. Thank you. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I said. The invoice is paid. I closed the lid. I turned to my family. Enjoy the wedding, I said. You aren't staying, my mother asked. Her voice was thin, desperate. We have a seat for you. Aunt Linda wants to see you. I have orders to fill, I said. My clients rely on me. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. I looked back at the kitchen. Through the archway, I could see the granite counter where I had stood 8 months ago. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I didn't come to ask for a seat, I said clearly. I came to finish a sentence I heard in that kitchen. Kenzie, don't, my father warned, his face reddening. You wished you only had one child, I said. Brielle dropped her hand from the box. The room went so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Well, I said, opening the door. Now you do? I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, with the precision of a craftsman finishing a job. I walked down the driveway to my car. I got in. I checked my reflection. I looked calm. I looked powerful. I started the engine and drove away. I didn't look back at the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see them. I knew exactly what they looked like. They looked like people who had just realized that the furniture in their house was haunted. And they were the ones who had invited the ghost in. The venue was called the Gilded Oak, a sprawling estate that smelled of old money and fresh lavender. It was exactly the kind of place my mother would choose to prove to the world that the Webb family was thriving manicured lawns, crystal chandeliers, and a silence so expensive it felt like a vacuum. I pulled my station wagon into the service entrance around the back. The gravel crunched under my tires. A gritty sound that felt too loud in the morning stillness. I was not a guest. I was not a sister. I was a vendor. I clipped the laminate badge onto my silk blouse. It read, Vendor Second Bloom Workshop. It was a shield. It was a passport. It allowed me to walk into the heart of the beast without anyone asking why I was there. I carried the box. It was heavy, wrapped in a protective velvet cloth. I walked through the catering kitchen, dodging staff who were polishing silver and folding napkins. No one looked at me. To them, I was just another pair of hands, another cog in the machine of someone else's perfect day. I pushed through the swinging doors into the main ballroom. The room was breathtaking in a cold, sterile way. Tables were set with white linens. Centerpieces of white hydrangeas and eucalyptus towered over the place settings. At the front of the room, near the head table, was a dedicated gift display. That was my destination. I walked across the dance floor. My boots made a sharp, rhythmic clicking sound on the parquet. Click, click, click. It sounded like a clock counting down. Brielle was there. She was standing by the head table, directing a florist who was adjusting a garland. She looked radiant, glowing with the frantic, happy energy of a bride 24 hours out from her wedding. She wore a white sundress that made her look innocent, soft. She turned and saw me. Her face lit up. It was a genuine, warm smile, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in 28 years. "Kenzie!" she exclaimed, waving the florist away. She rushed over to me, her hands clasped together. "You made it." I was worried the traffic would be a nightmare. "I am always on time," I said. My voice was calm, professional. I was not Kenzie Webb. The disappointment. I was Kenzie Webb, the artisan. "Is this it?" she asked, looking at the bundle in my arms. "This is it," I confirmed. "Oh, put it here, right in the center," she said, gesturing to a round table draped in gold cloth. "I want Caleb to see it the moment he walks in for the rehearsal." I set the box down. I unwrapped the velvet cloth slowly, revealing the dark, gleaming walnut. The wood caught the light of the chandeliers, glowing with a deep, rich inner fire. It was flawless. It was the best thing I had ever made. "Oh my God," Brielle whispered. She reached out to touch it but stopped herself. Hovering her fingers over the wax finish, "It is stunning. It is even better than the photos." "Open it," I said softly. She lifted the lid. The brass hinges moved silently. The smell of cedar and beeswax drifted up, a scent of grounding and earth in a room that smelled of artificial flowers. She read the engraving again. "To my Caleb, you are the only one who matters." Tears pricked her eyes. "He is going to cry," she said. "I know he's going to cry. Thank you. Kenzie, really, you have no idea what this means." "I think I do," I said. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. The air in the room shifted instantly. It became thinner, sharper. Caleb walked in. He was laughing at something over his shoulder. He looked like the golden boy he had always been, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a linen suit that fit him perfectly. He looked like a man who had never known a day of doubt in his life. Behind him were my parents, Robert and Ellen Webb. They were dressed in their rehearsal finery, looking regal and satisfied. They were the architects of this kingdom. Surveying their domain, Caleb saw Brielle first. He smiled, a lazy, confident grin. Then he saw the person standing next to her. He stopped. It wasn't a casual pause. It was a physical arrest. His feet simply stopped moving, as if the floor beneath him had suddenly turned to ice. The laughter died in his throat, cut off so abruptly it sounded like a choke. He stared at me. His face drained of color. The tan he had worked on for the wedding seemed to evaporate, leaving him gray and waxen. His eyes went wide, not with joy, but with a primal, confusing shock. It was the look of a man seeing a ghost. My parents bumped into him, annoyed by the sudden stop. "Caleb, what is—" My mother started. Then she saw me. Her hand flew to her mouth. It was a melodramatic gesture, one she usually saved for bad news on the television, but this time it was real. Her fingers pressed white against her lips. My father stiffened. His posture, usually so aggressive and dominant, slumped slightly. He looked suddenly old. The silence that fell over the group was heavy. It was a physical weight, pressing down on our shoulders. It was the silence of a secret's being exposed to the light. Brielle didn't notice the tension immediately. She was too focused on the box. "Caleb, look," she chirped, oblivious. "It is the gift, the vendor is here." Caleb didn't look at the box. He couldn't take his eyes off me. He took a step forward, then stopped, his hands twitching at his sides. "Kenzie," he croaked. His voice was rusty. Unused to the shape of my name, Brielle froze. She looked at Caleb. Then she looked at me. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "You guys," she started, her voice trailing off. She looked at my parents, who were staring at me with a mixture of terror and hostility. They were scanning the room, checking to see if anyone else was watching. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the audience. "Do you know each other?" Brielle asked. The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a small, polite curvature of the lips, the kind you give to a stranger on a train. "We used to," I said. The words landed like stones in a pond. Used to, past tense, a chapter that had been closed and burned. Caleb flinched. "Kenzie," my mother hissed, stepping out from behind Caleb. Her voice was a low, frantic whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I am delivering an order," I said, gesturing to the box. "Brielle hired me." "You are second Bloom?" Caleb asked. He looked at the box, then back at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The sister he had ignored, the sister he had erased, was the artisan his fiancée had been raving about for weeks. "Surprise," I said flatly. "This is," my father started, his face reddening. "This is inappropriate. You should have told us." "I told the client," I said, nodding to Brielle. "I am here on business. Mr. Webb, I am not a guest." "Do not worry about your seating chart." Brielle looked between us, her eyes wide. She was starting to piece it together, the missing sister, the vague answers whenever she asked about Caleb's childhood. The silence. "Wait," Brielle said. "You are the sister, the one who moved away." "I am the one who disappeared," I corrected gently. My mother took a step toward Brielle, her smile plastered back on, though it looked brittle enough to crack. "Oh, it is just a little mix-up. Honey Kenzie has always been so theatrical. We can talk about it later." "I am not being theatrical," I said. "I am being professional." I turned my back on my family. I focused solely on Brielle. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, soft cloth. "To maintain the finish," I told her, handing her the cloth. "Use this if it gets dusty. Do not use chemical sprays. Walnut is a living thing. It needs to breathe." I spoke calmly, explaining the care instructions as if the people standing 5 feet away weren't the ones who had given me life. I saw Caleb out of the corner of my eye. He looked sick. He looked like he wanted to say something, "I'm sorry." "Come back." Why, but he was paralyzed by his own cowardice. "And Brielle," I said, leaning in closer. My parents tensed. My father took a half step forward, ready to intervene, ready to drag me out if I started screaming. But I didn't scream. I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, intimate and kind. "There is a false bottom," I whispered. "Under the velvet, press the knot in the back corner." Brielle's eyes widened. "A secret," she whispered back. "A message," I said. "Open it later, after the wedding, when it is quiet." She nodded, touched by the perceived romance of it. She thought it was a love note from me to my brother. She thought it was a sweet family secret. "Thank you," she mouthed. I straightened up. I looked at Caleb one last time. He was staring at the engraving. "You are the only one who matters." He knew. In that moment, he knew exactly what that sentence meant. He remembered the kitchen. He remembered the laughter. He knew that I had heard them. The shame on his face was absolute. It wasn't the shame of being caught. It was the shame of being known. "Congratulations," I said to the room at large. "I didn't say I love you. I didn't say I miss you." I turned on my heel. My boots clicked against the floor again. Click, click, click. "Kenzie, wait," my mother called out. It was a weak, pathetic sound. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked through the double doors. I walked through the catering kitchen. I walked out into the bright, blinding sunshine of the parking lot. My hands were shaking, but only slightly. I got into my car. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a rough, reliable sound. I drove past the valet stand. I saw my father standing in the doorway of the venue, watching me go. He looked smaller than I remembered. He looked like a man who had lost his wallet, confused and angry at the inconvenience. I turned onto the main road and accelerated. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the crushing weight of grief I had expected. I felt lighter. I had walked into the lion's den, and I hadn't been eaten. I had looked them in the eye, and they were the ones who blinked. I drove for 3 hours back to Riverstone. I listened to a podcast about history. I stopped for a coffee. I existed in the world as a person who was whole, separate from them. I got back to my apartment at 8 in the evening. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across my floor. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. I looked at my phone. It was sitting on the table. Face up, I knew it was coming. The silence had been broken. They couldn't pretend I was gone anymore because I had forced them to see me. At 8:42, the screen lit up. It wasn't a text. It wasn't an email. It was a phone call. The name on the screen was Caleb. I stared at it. The phone vibrated against the wood of the table, a buzzing sound that filled the quiet room. He wasn't texting, "You good this time?" He was calling. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I reached out and picked up the phone. I didn't swipe to answer immediately. I looked at the name. Caleb, the golden boy, the only one. I took a breath. I swiped green. "Hello?" I said. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm, a stark contrast to the heavy, panicked breathing on the other end of the line. "What the hell was that?" Caleb's voice cracked. It was a sound I had not heard since we were teenagers, the sound of the golden boy realizing he had lost control of the narrative. "What kind of sick game are you playing?" "Kenzie, you just walked in here, dropped a bomb, and drove away." "I didn't drop a bomb, Caleb," I said, leaning back in my chair and watching the streetlights flicker on outside my apartment window. "I delivered a package, and I told the truth." "The truth!" he shouted. "Brielle is freaking out. She opened the secret compartment. She read the letter. She's in the bedroom right now asking me why I never talk about you. She is asking why Mom and Dad acted like they were seeing a ghost. She is asking if there is something wrong with me that I let my sister vanish for 8 months without calling the police." I took a sip of water. The cool liquid felt good against my throat. "Those sound like excellent questions," I said. "Do you have answers for them?" "You are trying to ruin my wedding," he accused. "You are jealous because I am happy and you are miserable." "I am not miserable, Caleb," I said softly. "I have a business. I have a home. I have a life that I built with my own 2 hands. I did not come to ruin your wedding. I came to make sure your wife knows exactly who she is marrying. She deserves to know that your family's love is conditional. She deserves to know that if she ever becomes inconvenient, she might disappear too." There was a silence on the line. It was heavy and suffocating. "We didn't mean to," he whispered finally. The anger had drained away, leaving only the pathetic reality of his complicity. We thought you needed space, and then the space got too big." "You didn't think I needed space," I corrected him. "You thought I was exhausting. You wished there was only one of you. Remember?" He hung up. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just severed the connection because he couldn't bear to listen to the echo of his own cruelty. I put the phone down. I expected to feel guilty. I expected the old programming to kick in. The voice that said, "Fix it, Kenzie, apologize, make them comfortable," but the voice was gone. In its place was a quiet, steel-reinforced resolve. The next 3 days were a masterclass in chaotic damage control. My phone did not stop buzzing. My mother sent a barrage of texts. They were a fascinating study in narcissism. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" or "Why did you feel unloved?" Her messages were all about the audience. "Aunt Linda is asking why you left so abruptly. The Millers are gossiping that we had a falling out. Please come to the wedding tomorrow. We can smooth this over. Just smile and sit at the table. You are embarrassing us. Kenzie, after everything we did for you." I didn't reply to a single one. I let them pile up like junk mail. The article about Second Bloom Workshop continued to circulate. My cousin Mark shared it with the caption, "Had no idea Kenzie was this talented. Crazy that nobody mentioned she had a shop." The extended family was starting to fracture. I could see it in the comments. Some were defending my parents. Family is private. Maybe she wanted to be alone, but others were starting to look at Robert and Ellen Webb with new eyes. They were seeing the coldness. They were seeing the erasure. I had not just stepped out of the shadows. I had turned on the floodlights. A week after the wedding, which I did not attend, my father called. He left a voicemail. His voice was gruff, strained. "Kenzie, we need to talk. Not on the phone. In person. We are driving down to Riverstone on Tuesday. Meet us at the coffee shop on 3rd Street, 10 o'clock. He didn't ask. He commanded. It was the old dynamic trying to reassert itself. I considered ignoring it, but I realized that for this to be truly over, I needed to close the book. I needed to look them in the eye one last time, not as a vendor, but as a free woman. I showed up at the coffee shop at 10:15. I made them wait. When I walked in, they were sitting at a corner table. They looked smaller than I remembered. My mother was nervously shredding a paper napkin. My father was staring into his black coffee, like it contained the answers to why his control was slipping away. I bought my own coffee, a latte with oat milk, and walked over. I pulled out a chair and sat down. "Hello?" I said. My mother looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had prepared her performance. "Oh, Kenzie," she sniffed. Reaching for my hand, I pulled it back, placing it firmly around my warm mug. "We have been so worried. How could you do this to us? How could you make us look like monsters to Brielle?" "I didn't make you look like anything," I said. "I just provided the context. How was the wedding?" "It was tense." My father grunted. "Brielle was asking questions all night. Caleb was a wreck. You cast a shadow over the whole day." "You cast the shadow," I said. "I just stopped standing in the dark so you could pretend it wasn't there." "We didn't know," my mother wailed. It was a soft wail, designed to garner sympathy from the other patrons. "We didn't know you were hurting so much. That comment in the kitchen, it was a joke. Kenzie, a silly, thoughtless joke. If you had just told us you heard it, we would have apologized." I looked at her. I looked at the tears that were real, but shed for the wrong reasons. She wasn't crying because she hurt me. She was crying because she had been caught. "That is the point. Mom," I said, "you shouldn't have to know I am listening to be kind to me. You shouldn't have to know I am hurting to care if I am alive." "We are your parents," my father said, his voice rising. "We paid for your college. We let you live in our house. We gave you everything." "You gave me everything except the feeling that I belonged," I said. "You gave me food and shelter, and you treated it like a transaction. You made me feel like a tenant you couldn't evict." I took a sip of my coffee. "I am not here to argue with you," I continued. "I am here to tell you how it is going to be from now on." My father bristled. "You do not dictate terms to us." "I do," I said calmly, "because I don't need you. I pay my own rent. I run my own business. I have my own life. I am not dependent on you for a single cent, which means you have no leverage." I set the cup down. "Here are the rules. I will not be coming home for holidays. I will not be a prop in your family photos, so you can pretend everything is perfect on Facebook. If you want to see me, you ask. You do not demand. And if you ever talk about me behind my back as if I am a burden again, I will disappear for good. And this time, I won't just leave a town. I will change my name." My mother stared at me. She looked like she was seeing a stranger. She was seeing the adult version of the child she had neglected. "You have changed," she whispered. "You are so cold." "I am not cold," I said. "I am solid. There is a difference." I stood up. I didn't finish my coffee. "Take care of yourselves," I said, "and tell Caleb I hope he enjoys the box. It is guaranteed for life, unlike some things." I walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I didn't feel the need to see if they were watching. I knew they were, and I knew that for the first time in their lives, they were afraid of me. 2 weeks later, an email arrived in my business inbox. The subject line was simply, "Thank you." It was from Brielle. "Hi, Kenzie. I wanted to wait until we got back from the honeymoon to write this. I found the letter, I read it, and then I asked Caleb about everything. He told me it took a few bottles of wine and a lot of crying, but he told me about the kitchen. He told me about how they used to treat you. He told me that he felt guilty, but it was easier to go along with them than to fight for you. I want you to know that I'm furious. I looked at your parents at the wedding, and all I could see were people who chose convenience over love. It has changed things. I don't look at them the same way. I don't let them steamroll me on decisions anymore. Your box sits on our mantle. It is the first thing people see when they walk in. Caleb looks at it every day. I think it reminds him to be better. It reminds him that people are not disposable. Thank you for the truth. It was the best wedding gift we got. Maybe one day, if you are open to it, we can grab a coffee. Just us. No parents. Best. Brielle. I read the email twice. A warmth spread through my chest, different from the anger that had fueled me for months. It was the warmth of connection. I replied, "I would like that. Let me know when you are in Riverstone." Summer turned into autumn. Second Bloom Workshop continued to grow. I hired my first employee, a teenager named Leo, who was quiet and awkward and loved working with his hands. I saw a lot of myself in him. I taught him how to sand without gouging the wood. I taught him that mistakes could be fixed, that a knot in the wood wasn't a flaw, but a feature. I moved into a larger shop, a real storefront with big glass windows on Main Street. Above the door, I hung a sign I carved myself, Second Bloom Workshop. One evening in October, exactly 1 year after I had walked out of my parents' kitchen with a bag of groceries, I was closing up the shop. The air was crisp and smelled of dried leaves. I turned off the lights in the showroom, leaving just the display lamp on in the window. It illuminated a beautiful oak dining table I had just finished restoring. I locked the door and turned to walk down the street. I passed a reflection in the glass. I stopped. I looked at the woman in the window. She was wearing work boots and jeans covered in sawdust. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the tired that comes from building something that matters. She looked happy. I thought about the girl who had stood in the hallway, clutching a bag of steaks, waiting for a punchline that never came. I thought about the girl who had burned a letter in a sink and washed her pain down the drain. They were part of me, but they didn't own me. My parents had wished for a life where I didn't exist. In a way, they got it. The Kenzie they knew, the quiet, desperate, pleading Kenzie was gone. She didn't exist anymore, but I did. I existed in the smell of sawdust. I existed in the ring of the cash register. I existed in the boundaries I had drawn and the respect I commanded. I looked up at the night sky. It was vast and full of stars. "I am here," I whispered, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. They wished I didn't exist. Now I do, just not for them. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at work, or maybe winding down at home? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading about where our community is from. If you enjoyed Kenzie's journey of reclaiming her life, please make sure to subscribe to the Emma Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need a reminder that it is never too late to bloom again.